Hi, Bridget.
Hello, Norma. It's so good to see you.
So good to see you too. I keep thinking as I do my podcast that I really want to speak to someone who has real insight into today because of their understanding of different periods of fashion and understands firsthand when something new happens that's really new. And there are a lot of people that can do that. But there's something about, first of all, the way your vision, but also women's wear uniquely has a place in the industry that I really appreciate because of its longevity, the steadiness, the authenticity of everything it does, and I think that's really valuable. Also, that the staff is there forever, and my staff is here forever, and that is the coolest thing. So thank you so much, because I have so many questions to ask, and I'm really looking forward to hearing, first of all, what brought you to women's wear in the first place?
Long ago, long time ago, I when I was getting out of school and ready to start my career, and I knew that I loved fashion and I knew that I loved writing. I didn't really put them together, but I kind of fell into an opportunity. I had one other job before WWD, and it was at a place called the California Apparel News. It was a California-based group, small group, and I was in the New York office. And I heard about an opening there, and I applied for it, and I got it. And it was perfect for me because, as I say, I always loved writing and I always loved fashion, and it was one of those things. I'm not, for better or for worse, I'm not a planner. And it just sort of happened organically. And then when I was there, it was a little bit of a farm team for WWD. And after, I think I was there like 16 months, and then the first time I heard of an opening there, I was working on a weekly. The first time I heard of an opening there, I didn't apply because I was kind of afraid of being on a daily. I thought, oh my God, I'm not fast, and I'm, and it'll be so stressful and whatever, and will I be able to do it? And then the second time I heard of an opening, I did apply. And I actually didn't get the job. Do you remember Ben Brantley?
Of course.
He went to the Times and became,
yes.
Ben interviewed me and Etta interviewed me, Etta Froyo, whom I adored.
Yes.
And, I didn't get the job. Ben called me to say, hi, Bridget, he didn't get the job, but we really like you. And so we'll keep you in mind. Before the week was out, I got a call. The person who got the job lasted one day and decided to go be an actress.
Oh, okay.
I was obviously the first runner-up, and I got it. And I'm not there any longer. I was there for many, many years, and I loved it. I think that it serves such an important industry purpose, and it was really, it was a wonderful place to be. And I think that it's the longevity is quite remarkable.
Yeah, it is incredible.
I want to tell you too, before we knew each other, a long time ago, there was some industry event, and you were going to sit at our table. And I remember Patrick McCarthy, whom I adored. He said to me, something came up and he couldn't go. And he said, Norma's going to be there. You will love her. She is the coolest person I have ever met. And I think that bears out. I think you are like the epitome of cool on so many levels.
That's very sweet. And he really, such a great guy. I have a great history actually with Women's Wear Daily and all of the early folks there who really, I'll tell you the quick version of it, and then we can get into the conversation. But I was in business for 14 years, and struggling along. I had a real cult kind of following, and I learned that this is what I loved, and I was so happy that I found what I could do. And then I had great coverage. Ben was everybody at Women's Wear covered what I did. I don't know why they did, because my business was so small. But then I had an idea. I did a collection of sweats in gray sweatshirt fabric, and I started to do swimwear cover-ups, and it turned out to be everything from suits to gowns to T-shirts to the works, 36 pieces. And I looked at it and I thought, I cannot do another collection and have Bloomingdale's copy it and do full page ads. And I'm trying to think of how I'm going to pay the rent. I can't do that anymore. So I remember calling Michael Cody and saying, Michael, I'm so afraid to just put this out, but I think this is really strong. I need somebody to give me advice on what to do, if it's worth anything. So he sent lots of people over, take a look at it. And they said, don't show it to anybody. and then they said, you need to think about a license agreement. And so I did. And I ended up doing a license with Jones Apparel, thanks to Women's Wear for really giving me guidance and protecting me. And that is never forgotten, ever.
I did that story, but I remember seeing the spread.
Yes.
Yes. That sweatshirt, when you say, why were they interested? Because your business was so small, but you were so influential and you hit so many nerves. You struck nerves.
Well, but that moment in time, I just knew that if I kept going in that path, it wouldn't be good. And I knew there was something, but the support that young designers have from organizations like Women's Wear is so meaningful to giving hope and opportunity. And it goes on and it keeps going on, that there are people who do that. And I'm saying this because whoever's listening, who probably are in the industry, should know that if they can help somebody that they really believe has talent, that it's a must. It must happen.
It's so important.
So today, so much has happened since the day we met, right, in the industry. So out of everything, what do you think is the biggest, and maybe not even mention AI yet, right? What do you think has been the biggest transformation of our industry?
I don't know if there's a single biggest, because there are sort of categories of big. I think that when I started, for example, when the metamorphosis of the luxury sector from individually owned maisons to the mega group structure, that was happening. When I started to go to Paris, covering the shows, it was like mid-90s, I guess. And, most of the, not Chanel, not Chanel, Chanel obviously is separate, but not Dior. Christian Dior was already acquired by Bernard Arnault through the deal that he was buying something else. But everything else was an individual maison. And it was very much a very, and a lot of them were by that time sleepy. And so it was sort of this percolating tension that for something new to happen. And then Don Mello hired Tom Ford at Gucci, and he didn't have his big breakthrough until after she left. But that really was emblematic of the change that was coming. And so we saw it. So that was the beginning of the shift. I'm leaving. I mean, Carl at Chanel and at Fendi was his own thing.
A whole other thing, yeah.
A separate entity, just this unbelievable life force. Yeah. And so it was remarkable, but that didn't start the creative director trend. And then, so Gucci, which was a laughingstock when Tom got there, there's this huge breakout show, and and then the acquisitions start, and then the appointments start, and all of a sudden you have John Galliano first at Givenchy, then at Dior, and you have Marc at Vuitton, and you have Alexander McQueen at Givenchy, and then you have the people are really paying attention now to this young Italian woman, Prada, who's taken over the family business. And the Japanese, Yoshi and Rei Kawakubo, they had been showing for a while in Paris, but they were part of this whole thing. So basically that huge metamorphosis of, the focus on the creativity, but while the industry is changing from a consortium of little or non-consortium, because there was no connection. They were just individual companies individual houses that, yes, they did show during a set week for ready to wear and a set week for couture. So that's a huge change.
Yeah.
A huge change, obviously, the importance of celebrity. Another huge change that I think that people talk about in terms of the casualization of clothing, but I think it's almost more than that, in that the sort of the demise of the, end use specific dressing. I don't know what to say, or situational, the demise of situational dressing, except for, say, a big wedding or a big event. Really, in everyday life, when I started in this business, there were still the ladies who lunch still existed.
Yes.
And they got dressed up in their Chanel suits or their Galliano suits or their Adelphos. They got dressed up to go to lunch.
Yeah.
At that time, there were things, when I started in this business, there was actually a category called weekend wear. I covered it, and so there were clothes that were considered office clothes. There were clothes that were considered cocktail clothes. Now you and I can go to the theater and you can wear a cocktail dress and I can wear jeans and neither one of us looks wrong.
Yeah.
And that's great for the consumer, but I don't know how great it is for the industry, because basically the reason for most of us to buy clothes now is because we really want them. Whereas once upon a time you had to have your different situations. So I don't think that gets like a whole lot of attention, because we're so focused on the advent of streetwear and the advent of athleisure, but it's beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are two very big, profound, still, very important, issues and kind of problems that the industry deals with in so many ways. I do think, I was thinking today about the fact that there's almost, instead of clothes to go places, there would even be clothing that you would wear if you were taking a trip, and what you would wear on the plane. You wouldn't be wearing your jogging pants or, pajamas. You'd wear
Dress
an
up
outfit. And in the 70s, people got dressed to go shopping, but majorly, like, not dressed up, just dressed. Style out yourself, because you're going to shop, so you need to like zhuzh it up. And there was some,
what you want to be.
Yeah. And there were some great outfits that during that period, because personal style was so important. In the industry, that the two, those are two really profound impacts on the industry and identifying the industry. What about the storytelling of what's going on? What's really news to you as a storyteller of the industry? What do you consider news, or what does the industry consider real news right now that is profound and important?
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. I think from a clinical standpoint, we're seeing another sea change right now because of all of the new creative directors coming in. And that's a sea change because, initially as that change was happening, they had longer tenures, and it was kind of, we didn't think of them. We didn't think of it because it was a new thing. So we didn't think, is this a lifelong appointment or not a lifelong appointment? But we expected them to be there for a long time, and they expected to be there for a long time. And now, so that's very much of a change. So it becomes, very much of I remember we used to do story. We did the story several times. I don't know whether it was in like the late 90s, early 2000s, whatever. Who has the power, the designer or the brand? Now there's no question. It used to be, it was really once a discussion. Now there's no question. But I think that there's there's so much talent out there, and so this is an opportunity for discovery. So in terms of news, I think that's very big news. So I think that's a big thing. In terms of the storytelling, there's so much to love about fashion. There's so many reasons why fashion is important. And, sort of grand scale, I think when you think about any historical period, anything from, cave people to now, you think first of what they looked like, how they were dressed. Maybe when you're talking about, classical Greece and Rome, you might think of the architecture as well. But overall, we think of the way people dressed, what they wore. So fashion is very, very much, a way of decoding history. It's social history, it's cultural history. So that's a big picture. And then there are all these declinations of that. And the most familiar is that, we have to get dressed, and you love clothes. And I think those of us who are in the industry, either as a creator, pure creator, as you are, or someone like I am, who's chronicled it for a long time, we like clothes more than most people, So when I see something really special, I get the storytelling of that. When you see a great show, when you see something that's really moving, when you see something that's powerful, I think that's really, really important. And it's rare because, a fashion, I don't think for the most part, it can veer toward art. Occasionally it can attain that level. But I think for the most part, if you want to call it art, it's commercial art. And which is great because we have to get dressed. But when you see something really special, I think, and there's a story around it, and there's a romance around it, and there's a grit around it, I think that's really, really important. And I think that's a constant. I think that was true, back in the 70s. I think it was probably true when, Elsa Schiaparelli was working. And I think it's true today that we are moved by something that takes our breath away.
Now, you've seen countless fashion shows, right? You
Any.
Yeah. And so what, if you were to pick 4 that for some reason impacted not only you, but everybody that went to see it, not just at the time of the show, but then had a reverberation after, what would those be?
Oh my goodness. There are so many, there are so many shows that I love so much, but let me pick the 2 bracketed shows. Okay. First, I would say Marc Jacobs Grunge and Perry Ellis. We're still talking about that.
Yes.
Jump to a year ago, January, John Galliano's amazing last collection. And I was not there in person, but amazing last couture collection for Margiela. And that's kind of what I was talking about just a little while ago. When you see something that takes your breath away, you think you've seen so much, taking your breath away. And that was just so stunning, so incredible. So, it makes you think that, okay, this person has been doing this for so long and he is still capable of this. And I am still capable of being transported somewhere.
Yeah.
Under the bridge. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. Let me see. There's so many others. I remember, well, no, that didn't impact a lot of people for the long haul, but I was going to talk about a show. Do you remember Angel Estrada?
Yes, of course.
Angel Estrada show. And it was very much, hey, cool kids, let's put on a show. It ran really late. His sister came in with a boat really late, carrying the clothes across the floor. So that was that was something. The McQueen shows. Perhaps if I were to pick one, what would it be? Maybe the dance marathon that was so moving. Do you know what there was a show that McQueen did. He did a couple of shows, and with McQueen, you could really understand his mood of the moment, how he was feeling from what was on the runway. He did this show called The Girl Who Lived in the Tree, and it started off dark and moody and broody, and everything was black with gorgeous embroidery. But then she came out; it was very Indian inspired, and then she came out of the tree, and in this explosion of color and beauty, and that was really, because you could tell that he was, in powerful and upbeat frame of mind.
Yeah.
And that was really, really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I think, the ones that you've mentioned really are markers. They're big markers in fashion.
You know what another one is?
Yes.
Ralph's 50th anniversary show.
Oh, really?
It was so, because it was this expression of joy. It was incredible. It was at Bethesda Fountain, and he showed Purple Label and Women's Collection, and then Polo. And the Polo was like this family fest of all these, multiple generations and kids and people coming down the stairs and everybody happy. And it really felt like, okay, fashion can, has to be a part of the moment, and it can critique the moment, and it can, if it's a dark moment, it can be dark, or it can go counter to the moment. But I think most of us usually want to find joy in getting dressed.
Yeah.
And this is just about being joyful and celebrating with family and friends. And it was really, that was an amazing marker.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about the impact of the celebrity? I remember when it kind of started in the front row situation, and then really almost, I would say at times, takes over and becomes more important than the show itself. So what do you think is happening with that?
It's not just, I was going to say you can almost drop the almost, I think that it was probably inevitable. I think that it started, I think initially it started with people going to shows. They were literally friends of the house, friends of the designer, whatever. But it just has become so, so, so important. And it's, on one hand, I think it takes away from, let me see, how do I want to say this? I don't want to say, that I think it's a bad thing. I think that basically, I think that it's part, oddly, of the democratization of fashion, because most people relate more to the celebrities that they champion, that they admire, that they relate to, than they do to fashion models. And also, we come from a pre-internet and pre-phone age where fashion was really insider. So this was happening as fashion was becoming less insider.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really, I remember when we started with W, because W used to be a sister publication to WWD, as you know. And when we started doing when celebrities started taking over, there was it was almost like a heavy line of demarcation when the celebrities started taking over the magazine covers. It's really interesting. Models, the internet age or the phone age, the social media age, has, I think, helped models have a renaissance.
Yeah, I agree.
They have become their own champions.
Yeah.
And which I think is a good thing. But I think that this was almost like a hard marker. And it was really interesting because, I'm not a stylist and I didn't do the cover shoots, but, Michelle Buckle and Josie and Alex White would come back and they would talk about it. And, the models were there to be models. And the celebrities were there representing themselves and their movies and their projects. And they are, at the end of the day, real people. Not that models aren't, but models are a different kind of real person.
Yeah.
And so they would be a lot less adventurous. There was once a very famous actress gorgeous, but I think it was Josie who showed up with some sheer things at the shoot, and she said, "That designer should be ashamed. I'm not wearing that. I'm not wearing." They're more real people. We think we see the giant screen and we think, no, they're not. But it's a very, so I think that's an interesting thing. And I think it also, the whole red carpet, then that became, it started with the front row. And then it started with, I obviously the Oscars have been around a long time, but actresses used to go buy their own clothes or have somebody buy, it was not, there were not, the stylist thing didn't happen when Wings was nominated, and whatever year that. So I think that I think that the red carpet has become such a huge, huge thing, and it's good. It certainly has made people aware of who of the major brands, and not just the major brands, but also, there have been smaller name people who've gotten exposure, which is a good thing. What I think is unfortunate is when you see sometimes, and now this is even maybe a thing of the past, because now it's such a machine. But I remember watching the Oscars sometimes and hearing a major name, and the actress would come up in a beautiful dress that had nothing to do with the aesthetic of the designer who is the creative director.
Right.
And it didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter because the name was telegraphed all the world over. I also think that the red carpet, and this isn't about celebrity dressing per se, well, it is, but I think that it's not necessarily the most interesting fashion that makes it to the red carpet. And I think that's very, very understandable. I know that fashion always loved Joan Rivers, but I think that Joan Rivers had a very negative effect on the red carpet.
Yeah.
I remember and you know what? She was doing a great job, and she was playing to a broad audience. And I remember once John Galliano did a Dior couture show, and there was this gorgeous green chinoiserie embroidered dress. When I don't know that you would do chinoiserie embroidery today, but and it had mink trim, which you probably definitely wouldn't put on an evening gown today. But when I was sitting there at that couture show, I thought, oh my God, the dress is so gorgeous. Then along comes Nicole Kidman in that dress. And Joan Rivers said, if I remember correctly, there goes Nicole Kidman in the ugliest green you'll ever see. And to me, that was like a dividing line. Okay, now we're going to play it safe.
Yeah. I think that that's happened several times. I remember in the especially 60s, 70s, I did a lot of celebrities of all kinds would shop themselves and would participate in the design of what they were going to wear to the Oscars. And one of the people I did many Oscar dresses for was Raquel Welch. Oh. And she owned her image.
Was she wonderful?
Well, she was wonderful to me. Let's put it that way.
That's what I mean.
She was wonderful to me. And she studied her eyes, her hair, everything. She knew she was the product. She knew what she was about. And we did many outfits together, especially the Oscar special events ones. And I really enjoyed it because with people like that, you saw a real understanding of what the image is, their body type. They work hard at their bodies and how they look. And so I think the result of the two of us together was great. And I loved the outcome. And she knew how to walk. She knew how to present herself. Cher would come in and put herself together in many creative looks. And then, here's another example of Cher took that to the edge when it came to any of these big award shows. And we saw some extremes. And it then started to have backlash, like the Joan Rivers thing, where people were afraid. And so, which leads me to the question, in this day and age of social media and people getting called out and canceled and ridiculed by some goony bird that's sitting in the middle of whatever, sending out messages that are, nasty and mean and horrible. Do you think that that's had an effect also on what people wear and how adventurous they are? Are they afraid of the critiques and the criticisms?
I think that celebrities are mindful of what of the potential critiques. I think that at the height of it, I'm so happy that they're both going to be back in new situations. But I think that I think that the red carpet got very boring for a long time. And then I think at the height of the Pier Paolo at Valentino and Michele at Gucci, it opened up a little bit. People would try new silhouettes, whatever. Then I think we've kind of gone back.
Yeah.
I think that people are, do you mean non-celebrity people in general, do you think are afraid?
Well, no, I think personalities that are experimenting, and there's a lot of experimenting, and
do you think there is? Do you think there's
well, let me put it this way. Experimenting has a definition here. I would say the red carpet is more about the wow factor than and not to say there aren't some beautiful things that have been done. I mean, extraordinary things, but it's like pow, pow, pow. Like, how big is the pow versus something that is just breathtaking. That you
100%. And you know what I think also, and the pow, pow, pow tends to be a very, understandable pow, pow, pow.
Yeah.
And I think that part of that is, again, the celebrities, it's part of their job. I mean, this now, presenting themselves as to a broad audience is part of their job, and they want to do it, and they want to be thought of as beautiful. I mean, and the reality is, most of us, when we get dressed, want to look really nice, sexy if possible, but most people are not thinking, I want to make a major statement.
Yeah, right.
I think, again, part of the democratization, it was very interesting. Did you follow the fashion at the Bezos Sanchez wedding?
Kind of, yeah.
I certainly did. And what was really interesting to me? It was, first of all, it was a few days before Poiret launched in Paris. Poiret famously freed women from the corset. At the wedding, there was the morning after, the day after party that was a pajama party. But at the wedding, almost every woman, Lauren Sanchez was in a corseted dress, and almost every woman there was in a corseted dress. And I mean, they looked beautiful. They looked really beautiful, but it was very much, variations on a uniform. And I'm thinking that, okay, so everybody, and I think today everyone is so, we've talked about body positivity, which is changing now with the weight loss drugs and everything, but we've talked about body positivity and all of that, but still people, it seems the goal is to look, as thin as possible, the cinch waist as possible. And yes, and I work out and my upper arms look great. So on one hand, you've got Poiret, who got women out of the corset. Then you've got all these people who are by choice in a corset, but there's really very little. I mean, yes, you can do there was a huge range of corseted gowns there, and a huge range of embellishment and whatever, but very, very, very little, adventurous spirit shown in terms of silhouette. Mm. Then the following week, you had the Mark show at the library, and he's doing all this experimentation with silhouette and with volume, and he's been doing this for a while, and it was really fascinating. And it sort of, maybe like, that level of fashion is, for as much as fashion has opened up and become democratized, and democratized is really funny when you're talking about the wedding of one of the richest people in the world, but you know what I mean, but that things that people relate to, and things that, women choose to wear for themselves, even, very famous, very wealthy, very, gorgeous women who have all things available to them, versus real fashion. Real fashion maybe, is still, for a small group of people.
Yeah, I agree. I do think Lauren Sanchez is she's very smart, and she's very savvy. And I think one of the things that happened, and I don't know her, I don't know anything about her, except when I see pictures of her now, it appears as if she has a very um, good stylist working with her because she looks great. She's come into a different kind of expression of who she is. She has her look, she has her body, she probably works out like crazy, um, and has the look she wants to have. And I think she has a stylist now who is appreciating what Lauren is about and then is dressing her and guiding her into a direction that I think is suiting her very well. And that's great. I think the stylist's entry into the world of fashion has changed it tremendously. Like Jimi Hendrix would never have a stylist, and a lot of people wouldn't. But in our age, having experts who know where to get anything to help is a good thing. And I think she's benefiting from somebody's skill.
But I think you said something very telling. I agree. I think she looked great. I thought she looked beautiful in the wedding dress. But I think that looking great is most women's, whether you're Lauren Sanchez or someone else, or someone going to, her daughter's wedding, or someone going to, out to dinner with her partner.
Right.
Most women's goal is to look great and not to be pushing fashion parameters.
Yeah.
I agree. I think she looked great. And I think most of the women at the wedding looked great.
Yeah.
It was kind of, but it was not, there was not a variety of, yes, as I say, there was a variety of surface interest, and there were, different, treatments on the bodice and whatever, but there was not a huge variety of real, when you stripped it down to what the silhouette.
Yeah,
and
I totally, yeah.
But I think she looked great. And I think that's not new. That has been probably most people's goal for getting dressed probably since time began.
Yeah.
Or since fashion entered the world, as opposed to just, covering ourselves in the forest.
So in our industry, it's very easy to get caught up in designing for designers and the press versus designing for the customer, right? It's very easy to go there because if you're creative, you want to express, you want to do marks, you want to see Rick Owens and all of these amazing designers come up with their genius. And then there's the other challenge of the customer. And for me, I would say that in the last 15 years, especially, and I've always been I do costumes and I've done costumes, but I've always been, I take care of women, right? Women, somehow that's turned out to be my purpose, right? And so what is going to make a woman feel good? How can I help her at a wedding or at some function, or at the moment she's engaged to someone? What is my role in that? And so I think that there are so many ways to look at fashion, right? I think I love doing costumes, but I do them outside of what I do. But it is so irresistible to see magnificent creativity in fashion that exceeds anything you could see in costumes anywhere, right? I mean, it's just the skill and the talent is extraordinary. How do you explain that that contrast of interests and goals for big companies that have to make a lot of money? And how do you see that?
Well, first of all, you said that somehow it became your role or your goal to take care of women. That should be what fashion does. I mean, that should be what at the end of the day, all of the, the showpieces are great, but if the customer isn't relating to you, if the customer isn't if you don't make me feel good, if you don't make me feel my best self, then I'm going to move on. And that's ultimately what fashion should do. But there are different roles and different goals and different purposes. I mean, we always used to say, you'd go to a Ray Kawakubo show and just come out,
right.
Yeah. But we would always, we don't want everybody trying to do 3 sleeves. That's not what, she's a singular person. And by the way, she's got a lot of, little t-shirts with hearts on them that she sells. You know what I mean? With eyes.
Yeah.
So I think that's the big thing, isn't it? That's, and I think what you've done is so unbelievably, I mean, how you have been in this industry for many, many, many years. And you have stayed in this industry for many, many, many years, with a customer base, and you have stayed independent because you are giving, you are speaking to women. You are telling me that, that I'm doing this for you, and I want this to help you bring out your best self. And that's ultimately the most important thing. Yes, I'm going on about, the sort of push creativity and all of that. And that's wonderful, but it's only wonderful if there's something behind it. And if there's real serious clothes behind it. And I don't mean serious as in crap, I mean real clothes that I can seriously wear and walk out of the house and not look like I'm a crazy person,
right.
So, and also, by the way, that are accessible to people, who, to me, if I'm not super rich, becoming a real issue at the luxury level.
Yeah.
And, so I think that's, that's just so important. And the major brands, the major houses, I mean, they do, they have the runway, and it's really important, but they also, the bread and butter is often the classics.
Yeah. Or the handbags or the shoes.
Exactly. Yeah. Handbags, the classic handbags or whatever. And so, I mean, because that's the reality. That's the reality.
Yeah.
And I think you have done, I mean, just look at the things that you have done over the years. You talk about those the gray fleece. Who's knocked that off? Everybody, and the famous, sleeping bag coat. Who hasn't done a version of that you invented, and that's because it looked great from day one, but it also has a real pragmatic purpose, and that purpose doesn't go away.
When the industry is looking at the future of women, what have been the stories of women? And if I'm what I'm referring to is there's Ladies Who Lunch. Mm-hmm. They've kind of phased out, and sort of every generation has this movement that identifies who it is. And so there's a lot of conversation about Alpha and Gen Z, and their interest in clothing is very different. Some, in some ways, not as interested as previous generations. And their point of view about everything is certainly much different in about life. And so predicting, and again, storytelling about where the future of fashion is, how does that come together? How have you been telling that story?
I remember years ago, Karl Lagerfeld saying, you can't predict beyond 6 months. I mean, I really think it's so hard. And especially today, everything is so fast. You talk about Alpha, you talk about Gen Z. They are still very young. The Gen Zs are still even very young. And I think that you do, there is a rejection, less of an interest in clothes. Absolutely. We hear that all the time. But I think that I don't know how you predict today, because things move so fast. And it's just so funny to hear the dialogue and the sort of the sometimes between millennials and Gen Zs, and then, in the millennial, oh, well, these Gen Zs, and you millennials. There's a certain play acting element to the counter to the counterpunch, but I don't know. It would be great to be able to predict. It is so hard. I mean, I think we're seeing certain things that are, sort of swinging back. Even a few years ago, fur was verboten. I heard you talking about fur with I think watching the podcast with Terry Akins, and it seems to me that there's a little bit more of a swing, more of embracing fur again. I mean, I've been to events with where a lot of young women wore fur, and 5 years ago, 5 years ago is that time. Nobody's leaving the house 5 years ago, but you know what I mean. Before that, so I think that it's very hard to judge the tides. I do think that so much now, we talked about situational dressing of yore, and so much now really is personal choice. And that's really going to be the key, I think, for brands, for designers, for everyone to sort of focus in on, on what people want. I mean, on what feels good. At the same time, I think the big thing is not to try to be all things to all people. Because I think that when it's just all about personal choice and you try to be all things to all people, what's your message? Then what, what I mean? What you have to be willing perhaps to give up, to give up some market share here, or to say, I don't know. I think that you can be inclusive and smart and welcoming, but still have a point of view. I think that ultimately is the most important thing, to have a point of view and to evolve that point of view with the time, but still to not lose who you are.
Yeah, authenticity is key there. I think that survives it, I would assume. So now let's talk a little bit about where people shop. I mean, there was getting dressed to go shopping, and then obviously COVID was a big, we refer to things as before COVID, BC, and after COVID. And so
I think we all live our lives that way.
Yeah. So what are your observations on the different ways people shop, and where you think that's going?
I think that, obviously there was so much reevaluation going on. There was so much, how much do I need going on? And the reality is that there are still, many industries and many offices, many companies have demanded people going back to work, but not necessarily 5 days a week. I think that really just sort of intensifies the concept of choice, because if you're not going to work every day, if you're not getting dressed to leave the house, one thing you don't need is clothes. So I think that's an issue, and so there's that. I think that the casualization element is still there. I think that people, we talk about Gen Zs and Alphas, the ever expanding. I mean, vintage has been around forever. You know that, and vintage, but I think that it's so much a part of people's lives now, and it's become sort of both a thing that, the big shows get all this attention, the big vintage shows, but it's also the way a lot of not only younger people, but many, many, many younger people shop all the time. That's like their primary. So that's a very big thing. That's a very good thing, because it does speak to, people can discover and rediscover not only the Norma Kamali of today, but to see the Norma Kamali through the years, and how it has legs, and how those clothes last. So I think that's a big thing. I mean, obviously the online shopping is not going away. That's a big thing. I think that is crisis too big a word to use for department stores? I don't know. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking recently about Bloomingdale's in the 80s, in the early 80s, and what an extraordinary experience that was. And it was relative to the time, clearly. And I had a great relationship with them. They were very supportive of everything I was doing. And they're actually doing nicely now. Unfortunately at the expense of Saks and Neiman's, but I worry that unless we anybody that is in a business disrupts themselves, you will get disrupted if you don't do it first. And it's sort of been my motto through the years.
Ever, right?
But if you see that the same thing is happening over and over again, and it's not creating an energy change, a shift, or something that's meaningful about the future, it doesn't look good. And I feel disruption is so much a part of this time we're in, and is just and is as difficult as it is for a lot of people to deal with. That a lot of people are having mental breakdowns and emotional experiences and needing all kinds of therapy. And I think we have to accept that this time we're living in is all about disruption, and we have to accept it because the change is big that's coming. AI is just presenting the biggest change in our lifetimes. And so the department stores, to me, are neglectful. They're neglecting their job and their purpose for the shopper. And I find it very disturbing that they can leave an opportunity on the table by just not doing something that's going to make people want to be in their space, right? To want to be there with excitement. So I don't know. I think a disaster is the appropriate word, and I feel badly about it. I'm mourning it, actually. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny, but when you say that about Bloomingdale's, I think Bloomingdale's looks pretty good these days.
Yes,
great.
No, absolutely.
When you say that, you're mourning it. I wonder if the department store is a model that has lasted for a very, very, very long time, and maybe its time is now waning. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's not just that they're doing everything wrong. It's been 150 years. I don't know. It's very difficult. And then they've got to deal with the fast fashion people, and they've got to deal with, and fast fashion has such a bad rap, and people, criticize it all the time. But, there are also, major brands and major vertical people who are not fast fashion. I don't know why anybody wears, a t-shirt, a cozy t-shirt other than Uniqlo. They're great. Mm-hmm. Years ago, I went to a technology event that they had, and a speaker said, "We are not fast fashion. We are not expensive, but we make our clothes to last." And so that's something that so many, and that's that brands and brands who are not huge brands have to deal with that level of competition. Yeah. It's also complicated and difficult. That's why it's amazing that you have been able to stay independent. I mean, you can count on one hand the number of people who've stayed independent over the long haul, and that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal.
Well, I really hope that designers or creative people look at their future. And I guess because I really wanted a creative life more than anything, I spent many years just wondering if I would be in business the next day, literally. But I think to me, it's the only way. If you don't want to design by committee in the end, where people are telling you how to design or just letting you go because they don't want to tell you and they don't want to give you feedback, owning a business and looking at numbers and looking at what's selling and looking at what people like and looking at the current political condition, social condition, economic condition is a daily exercise for the freedom to have a creative life. And I believe that there are people who will be drawn to that. I just hope more are, because it's worth it if that's what you want. And I think that's where authenticity will see more of that, and that can exist. And I think AI may be helpful in that way.
What are you doing? I know that you're doing something with AI, and I don't understand it. What are you doing?
So I had I from my early career at the airlines, when I started, I was sitting behind a UNIVAC computer in the 60s, and I became very comfortable with what that was. And so in 1996, I had my own website because I couldn't wait. I knew, I understood. And so my interest in all of these technology experiences through the years has been very close and comfortable and exciting for me. I was in Abu Dhabi, and I had an appointment with some people and some scientists who wanted to do a website designed, operated, and every aspect of it done by AI. And they had tracked what I did with Walmart. I did that 3 years with Walmart, which was one of the best experiences of my life, I have to say.
That's great.
And it was amazing. And so what I did for Walmart was a wardrobe, very affordable. Everything was $20 and under, but it was made in great factories. And I had my quality standards, everything. I gave them the patterns. I was very controlling of what that product could be. And so there would be a trench coat, a white shirt, a black pant, a suit, ballet slippers, loafers, a pump, that kind of thing. And so they knew a lot about it, and they asked me if I'd be interested in working with them. So of course, yeah, I love that. And then they said, we'd like to download your brain. I was like, oh, okay. So on my way home, I was thinking, no, I don't think
was that a serious thing? They wanted to download your brain?
Yeah. But and by downloading my brain, it meant that they would really track everything I did and follow me and really get in my head on how I think, what I do. And then I started to think about it, and I started to think about the future of my company. I have an archive that's 58 years of designs. And so what is the future of this company? I do want to live to 120, but I should have a backup plan, a plan B and C and D and E. And so from that, I did some research on AI and how I could take my archive in some way with AI. And I took a course at MIT, and it was a short course, but it was on generative AI, and it was incredibly difficult for me, but I managed to get through it. And fortunately, I don't think anybody knew who Norma Kamali was or cared, but it was 150 people globally that participated. And so from that, I came away with lots of ideas. And I found somebody who had just started a company to help me put a program together that could protect my IP and download all of the different collections, categories, classifications from my archive. And we're still doing it. It's so much. And from that, I've been able to create new Norma Kamali just from prompts and seeing clothing that looks just like I could have designed it is fascinating. So there's the practical side of it where I could train people in the company to use it for maybe doing exclusives for Bloomingdale's, right? And putting in information that they would give. Or for me, I do some things that are very free form, and I leave it mostly up to AI. And what happens is I get these extraordinary, incredible pieces of clothing generated, but AI doesn't have a soul, doesn't have a heartbeat, doesn't have to pay the rent, doesn't have to worry about fit, doesn't have to worry about a number of things, right? And so the clothes that come out of that are the things that have none of these responsibilities attached to them. And they're gorgeous and beautiful, and they look exactly like something I would do, except the balance of I need to make sure it fits, it feels good, it can be made, it's affordable. So I have to.
It's coming out as patterns. Are they coming out? Is it a 3D printer thing?
No, it comes on a screen. So what I do is prompts are critically important in this process, and this program is a little complicated. And I've learned kind of how to use it properly, and then also to kind of just zoom it
but you the finished the finished garment, it's not like a technical sketch.
No. So what happens is it's taking the material I'm giving them, and it's taking it, it's like putting a whole bunch of things in a jar and shaking it up and then spitting it out, and all the pieces come together, and all of a sudden you see on the screen it literally looks like a blur like this, and then the blur starts to form and you start to see images, and then the image is still blurry, but it gets clearer and clearer and clearer, and it's just so. In all the years I've been in business, I have to really say this is the most creative experience in fashion that I've ever had. And it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of what can be done.
That's phenomenal. But let me ask you this. You are Norma Kamali doing that with the resources of Norma Kamali's archive. So, but what about someone who doesn't have your archive, but can still buy a vintage Norma Kamali and can sort of take what you do online and then feed that into, his, her, their AI?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So that can be, that obviously can be done. And I've gotten to know a little bit more about how, whether it's Microsoft or all of the big companies that are looking at protecting IP, and there's a lot of effort being made, and it's certainly going to happen where there is oversight of some kind, and because they have to make it grow and be more successful, it has to. And Bridget, I will tell you, in the conversations I've had with these people, there is a possibility, for example, if they sort this out, and I put everything in my archive and everything new I do under this umbrella, this protective AI umbrella, that for the first time in the history of my 58 years, I might be protected. My clothing might be protected because, and I'm making this up, but if there's an AI kind of monitor of, say I do a dress and I put it into this program and now it's protected, I can either say, if you want to use this, here's a royalty fee you have to pay. Or if you want to buy it and have total uses, here's another fee. Or if you use this, there is a fine. And so I think something like that can happen. So if there are designers, especially young designers who are designing and they're being knocked off and obviously taking advantage of, they could be earning money on either licensing or selling or protecting themselves. Now, I'm making this up, but there is some version of that that is very likely to be some sort of a reality. So in all the years in fashion, there are rare circumstances, maybe certain handbags have been protected, but I trademarked my high heel sneaker, but there were people that still did high heel sneakers. I just didn't sue them because, like, why am I doing that? I'm not going to do that. But I will say it's time that the fashion industry is protected and that there is a respect for fashion design and that it is treated with the dignity it deserves. It's not easy designing and staying in business and creating a company. So there are many industries that build their success on knocking off. And I'm not sure that that's an ethical standard that's going to hold up in the future.
That's so interesting. I don't know enough about it, but what you're describing sounds so wonderful, but it also seems that there's a huge flip side of facilitating knockoffs and facilitating IP theft.
Yeah. Well, I think that's got that has in order for the future of AI to really expand to where it obviously is going to go. There's a lot of work being done on figuring out protections. So I am actually looking forward to it because I would love to see that happen to our industry. And then the people who do fast fashion have to pay a fee or have to pay for that use, right? That there has to be something like that.
Do you know what's phenomenal? Like how forward thinking you have been from day one. It is absolutely phenomenal. Forward thinking you've been when you talk about sitting at that computer when you were at the airline, when you were a kid, and that the technology here, you've always wanted this creative life, but the technology also got what's a bee in the bonnet, and that you are using it all now. It's incredible.
What do you think the industry will do with AI? I remember when we all got our computers, our laptops. We had the beginnings of no more. Okay, we're not going to be using fax machines anymore, and we tend to be holding on to things longer. How do you think the industry is going to deal with some of this movement?
I don't know. I think that it's inevitable, as you described. A year and a half ago, when everyone started talking about it, AI's been around for a while, but it was about a year and a half ago or something when the conversation started, and some AI geniuses, I don't know whether it was Sam Altman, we have to step back and we have to, because we don't know, it's so dangerous, whatever. That conversation is over now. So I think that it's all a given that it's here, and I don't know where it's going to go in fashion. I hope it doesn't take, just as I do it with writing and I do it, with all creative industries, I hope it doesn't replace, human creators. That's my fear. And I also have a bigger fear kind of as AI takes over jobs from a micro standpoint. How do the people whose jobs are being replaced, what do they do to keep the lights on and food on the table? And even though it's not parallel to the Industrial Revolution, because that took a longer time. Yeah. And the Industrial Revolution, there was not the capability then to actually replace humans in a broad sense. So there's that. And then big picture, if no one's working, what's the tax base? So but that's, apart from that, but I think that it's here and it's infiltrating now everything. So where exactly fashion will go with it, I don't know. But it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And when you are so open-minded about it, it's incredible.
I think from what I understand, Chat GPT-5 is going to be a big benefit to creative people, and there's a lot of really great information about that. So hopefully we see what that is soon, and how it can support some of the things we need in the industry. So in the fashion industry, the fashion schools are really such a big part of how we look at the industry, and the roles have changed a lot. Tell me what you know about what the schools and what's going on now.
What I know about the school, I think the schools focus more on, sort of a holistic approach as opposed to just creativity. That's gone on for a long time now, I think, but I think that they really do focus on business and the pragmatic aspects of the business, which I think is really, really good. I think one of the issues that has come up is what in our celebrity obsessed world, what is the future of the trained designer in terms of now. The reality is that there's one Norma Kamali. And for every one Norma Kamali, for every one designer who has made a name and built a career and built a brand and built an identity, there are probably hundreds of designers, across the industry who are making it a decent living and working for someone else. But I think that most young creative people who go into school want to be you. They don't want to be the person behind. And so, but as we get into all of the, the obsession with celebrity and the deals that's, and the celebrity, and celebrity appointments and that kind of thing. And what's the future for is there a does the possibility remain, and is that grail of becoming Norma Kamali, of becoming a major designer still available to people? I think that young people certainly think it is, because they flock to these fashion schools. They really love fashion. They're passionate about creativity, and which is really, really a good thing.
Yeah.
And and I think that what's really interesting about some of the recent appointments we've seen, there's almost like a little sort of going back to the trained designer with, Pier Paolo at Valentino, Pier Paolo at Balenciaga, and Sarah Burton at Givenchy, and so, which I mean, I think I think that there's a real value in being, yes, there's a value in being a celebrity and coming to fashion from an outside standpoint, and maybe taking on an appointment, or launching your own brand and hiring people. But there's also a value in really being, in the trenches, and being that, having that, that creative soul, and then the talent to sort of express the soul. So I think that I certainly hope there will always be a place for it in the industry. I certainly hope so, and I think there will be. I mean, I think ultimately, I mean, every not even generation, every era finds its way, and just because something that's that has been, that we've known, is no longer working or is no longer the norm, doesn't mean there's not something equally as exciting and valid and as sort of explosive to take its place. I do think that I think it's never ever 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 been easy to make to quote unquote make it in fashion.
Yeah.
And I think that it's harder than ever now, probably.
Yeah. People have no idea. No idea. They think, people that know me, I don't know what they think I'm doing every day, because they just they think it's like I'm dressing people up and it's fun, and it's like, wait, there's a lot.
Even some people who've known you a very long time.
Oh my, totally. I mean, even people close to me, when they actually see that, oh my God, I can't believe that you have to do that. It's like, yes, of course. Just a question about New York fashion versus European, French, Italian, Asian. What are your thoughts about the place? I think, Ian Schrager and I have been friends forever, and we agree about a lot of things. And one of the things we absolutely have no question of is that New York in the 70s was in such an incredibly explosive creative time, where big things changed the whole direction. Talk about celebrity, it changed everything. And so where are we now in the global fashion horizon? Where are each of these cities, and how does New York kind of fit into this?
I don't think that New York is at its most high profile moment right now. And I don't think it's for a lack of talent. I think there's a lot of talent. I think there are I think there are a lot of issues. I think that I don't really know why, except that it's become a little bit dispersed. People. I think that the sort of expansion of New York Fashion Week, so that not everyone shows during New York Fashion Week, is maybe good for the individual brands, but not good for the smaller ones, and not good for the industry overall. I think that it's really, really hard to stay in business. It's hard to stage a show, and if you don't stage a show, it's really expensive to stage a show. But if you don't stage a show, you don't get the attention. So there's all of that. And I think that there's, there was that generation in the 90s that came up, that there was all of this excitement around the Proenza generation. I'm so happy for them, by the way. And I think that they're going to do a great job at Loewe. But it's sort of, there was all of this promise and all this excitement. And it was, and then then the reality set in. Some of them went to Europe to show, and then the reality set in of, how do I keep this business going? And the reality is that people want to be at a certain level of the market, and you are competing with the mega brands, with the mega Europeans. And so it's so hard. So I don't know. I think it's tough. And I think that, I've used this example a lot, but we have a different view of fashion here than in Paris, than in Europe. And, it is nothing new. It is very, very old. Several years ago, again, it's one of these things, I think it was 3 years ago, but it was well before the pandemic. The Met did a story on life at Versailles. And it was the first time I read this John Adams quote that I have invoked so many times. John Adams was something to France at the time, before he became president. It's amazing how worldly our founding fathers were. But his quote was that if you're going to Versailles, you have to visit a French tailor, a French boudier, a French wig maker, a French this, a French that, because you can't possibly wear your old American clothes.
Right.
There is a bias. There's a bias against, I think, and that's just how it is. And it's not, and if you look at the Forbes list of richest people, there are more Americans on the list, but they are Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg, and the Europeans are Arnault and Wertheimer and Pinot, and it's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so I think that, and that's sort of a big perspective, but I think it trickles down. I really do. And I think that there's not like the support for younger people. Like, how do they get the backing, the financing to sort of continue on what they're doing? But at the same time, once you sell, then you've sold, and then you can't look to still doing it 58 years later. Doing it. So it's so complicated. I think it's really, really, it's tough. It's so tough for these young designers. And yet I think then you see something amazing, and that's why I think a lot of them now are looking at sort of fashion. I think that there are people who are pure creators and they love it, but there are many who are looking at fashion more as a means to an end, as opposed to the end in itself. You know what I mean? Part of a more sort of a more perhaps a broader branding of the self. And I think that that's, maybe what they have to do. It's tough. It's really tough on them, I think.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. Go ahead, finish.
I remember doing a panel once, and someone, I forget what the question was, but someone said that the barrier to entry used to be too high, but now in a way it's so low that you can sort of get something together to set, you can launch a brand, a DTC brand online, but then how do you keep that going? It's so hard, and it's so hard to get the attention if you're doing that. Which I had never thought of that. I thought, wow, that's a very interesting concept. I don't know if I agree with it, but it's certainly food for thought.
What looking at everything, if you, and I'm sure you have ideas about this because you've expressed some really good insight. What advice would you give industry leaders in New York to sort of rethink how we operate as an industry, this is a very important industry to New York, and how we secure kind of a base that not only supports the industry but also promotes it. What advice you must have some thoughts about this?
Oh my God, that's such a huge question, because it's not only small people who struggle. So it's very hard, I think, for the industry leaders to be there to form the support structure when they're challenged in their own businesses. I guess I think the most important thing is we're talking about authenticity and, and point of view and staying true to who you are. And I think those are the most important things. And maybe, and I don't know how I don't know how you sort of don't pursue growth, especially if you're a public company, because that's kind of, but that's the thing, the sort of the frenzy for growth. It's so, it's so omnipresent, and it's so overarching. And maybe, and not every company is intended, not every aesthetic is intended to go huge.
Yeah.
I think you have to really know, you have to, I guess, know thyself. That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's not much advice, but I think that it's very difficult, because I think that, it's not just the small people who are challenged. I think staying vibrant and staying functioning in this business is really, really hard at every level.
Yeah. And maybe it's at staying profitable.
Yes.
In wherever you want to be. And I think you're right. I think that's a really good comment, that it's like proud to say, I am now a $500 billion kind of like, and my goal is for this, instead of what's the profitability of a company like that. And the going in and out of business the way the companies do is really disturbing. And then seeing companies that were so great and so productive do this and then like that. There's something, and I think you might have hit it on the head, that getting those numbers up proves success instead of longevity, authenticity, and profitability. I mean, I have another question. The tariffs are, our industry, I would say many people have gotten somehow affected by the tariffs, and I have, but I also understand the reason for tariffs and the balancing of it. So I'm not, taking a side and wanting to carry on about it, but when something like that happens, it affects profitability. And so everybody, no matter where you're at, if you're not producing domestically, which is very hard to do, very almost impossible to do, you're affected by tariffs. Um, and so understanding profitability and how to deal with prices and all of that is very much it's half of my day every day now. Half of my day every day is okay. Now, what are we going to do? Costing, profitability. How are we going to look at it? What is the collection I'm going to do next? How is that collection going to be affected by this? I don't want to lose the girl who loves me and loves buying from me and the prices. I can't abandon her. I have to think of how to deal with that and how the tariffs and everything else that's involved with it. So, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I don't know. It's hearing someone who's faced with it, it's incredible. Have you taught classes at Parsons or FIT? Because you should. Because the way you're saying this, I mean, you are a creator, and yet you say half of my day is spent on how to maintain profitability and how to do all these things without without sacrificing the creative and without sacrificing the client, because you don't want to add all this price on to price her out of to price out the woman who loves your clothes. I don't know. It's such a complicated industry. And you talked about, how hard it is and the people not understanding it. It is such a complicated industry. There's so much competition and there's so much, there are so many, levels of, so many places to go wrong. And so many, but there's also, it's also so, important to who we are as people. What you're doing, what you give people. I mean, the way you dress, that's your letter to the world. And it's really, really important. It's important psychologically, it's important spiritually, it's important emotionally. And, so we want there to be, Norma Kamali and Norma Kamali's competitors and Norma Kamali's, and the people who will come after Norma Kamali. And we want to have those wonderful, passionate people. And I don't know. I don't know I certainly don't know what the answer to the tariffs is. I mean, that's incredible. I agree with you that it's lovely to think that everybody can produce in the United States. That's not realistic.
Yeah. No.
That's just realistic.
No. And if we could, it would take robots, because even though, I thought, oh my goodness, we have all of these immigrants. If there could be some vetting and structure in place where a company like mine could open a factory and get tax credits for training people and putting a factory together and building, new taxpayers and all of that. But there isn't enough thought about building the industry back to get the support of it. And of course, now the immigrant situation is also a difficult one. And again, it's very complex. So I, quite frankly, think that the AI is going to have jobs that are very different. And I don't think I know young Chinese in China and even here don't want to be sitting behind a sewing machine or in a factory. They just don't. They have no interest in draping or all of that is even being technology is so involved in that process now too. So the idea to me of having robots who could work 24 hours a day and hand knit sweaters, and do one of a kinds and doing things like that. And so I would love the US to be a place, because that we could do, right? We have plenty of structures in place. And if we train robots, program them to do anything you want on your website. Here, you can have a one of a kind. You can design your own dress. You can make a little black dress that you like, and then boom, these robots can do it. Think about what that could mean. So I think, like I said, this is such a disruptive time where if it's not working now, it's almost time to say, disrupt the shit out of yourself right now. Otherwise, you should just walk away from whatever it is you're doing. And I do think there is a way to manufacture in the US and to get support for our industry, but it's going to take, I think, a united force and people who really want to make a change especially in the New York fashion. And there's great fashion.
Do you think there were enough people who would come together to do that?
No. No, but I think there are things that are going to happen that are going to bring us together. I'm a believer in that. I'm feeling it. I think there's a disruption that is going to cause us to connect again with each other. And hopefully
connecting though I do think that there's sort of a post-COVID connection.
Yes.
I really do. I think that people, I guess there are still people, people at a lot of people that don't want to go to work, the office every day, whatever. But I do think there seems to be a connection vibe
that we need. We
need, and that we're experiencing a little bit of. I think.
Yeah.
I think people have been, I am an island thing. We're not.
Yeah.
Social beings, and I think it's really necessary, and I think it's happening now. If that can be sort of expanded to an industry, when it's kind of hard when I have my own problems to think of the bigger issue.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So
that's brilliant. What you just said overrides everything. And that's the individual, right? We are all individuals, and having a connection with each other, a newfound connection. And I think all of the devices we have kind of gotten in the way of that. But you're right. You're right. It's, if you have whatever issues going on, how does anything come in front of that? And that's the key. But I do think storytelling I remember when I was in 6th grade, I wanted to be a muckraker. I want that. That's the job I want. And then storytelling and all of that. And I thought I was going in that direction. So I always am sort of jealous of people who can tell the stories and do what you've been doing and seeing the history of our business, of our world.
And one of the greatest, I mean, fashion gives us entry to, and especially from my end, gives you entry to things that you would never see, right. That you would never have experienced, which is so wonderful. But it's also, one of the great privileges is seeing careers over the long haul. These, you see the people who are the upstarts of their generation, and then who are sort of the ones who appear at that bright light for a moment and then fade away, and the ones who last, and how it's developed. And that's been such a privilege over a long time. It's really incredible watching you for all of this time. It really, because it puts, there's such perspective to it, and there's such a narrative to. Story told over time.
Yeah. The history. Yeah.
It's a story told visually over time.
Yeah.
Which is really it's really funny because that's what, what I do as, I'm a writer, not a stylist, but still observing and critiquing and writing about a visual product and doing this sort of before our lives became completely visual on a phone.
Yeah.
So it's such a privilege. It really is.
What's the most fun you have each season? Like, what do you look forward to still today? Because you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. I can hear in your voice that you love what you do?
I love going to the fashion shows. I love to see I love the surprise of a great show. I love, or even if someone's, a really established designer is kind of playing to type, when something really wonderful happens and moves me, I just love that. There's such a rush to it. I think it is I so admire what designers do, whether it's, Norma Kamali or Ralph Lauren or the kids starting out. I went to the SCAD graduation this year, and to see those kids putting it all on the line, to see the work that they did, it's so exciting to see, and it's so hopeful, because the bottom line is that's what creativity is. That's what, creative output is. It's an expression of hope. It's an expression of hope for the future.
Mm.
And it's wonderful to see. And then people are expressing that through clothes, which I happen to really love. That's what I most get excited about.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to end the conversation. We could go on for a long time.
This was so much fun.
I knew that you were the person to have this conversation with. I love listening to your perspective, and it really kind of gave me perspective hearing it through you. I have to say, it was super helpful. I think this will be interesting for people in the industry who are just wanting a little perspective on what's been going on. And your point of view is so clear and helpful. And I really appreciate that you took the time to do this with me.
I'm honored that you asked me. I've had so much fun.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Hey, press follow and leave a comment after you listen to the podcast. Thanks.